All right. Welcome, everybody. I am Josh Tappan from the Seesaw team, and welcome to Young Engineers, Engineering Design for Our Littlest Learners, led by Brittany Tarr. During this session, please take notes, share insights, be active while learning. If you like something that Brittany is saying, you got a bunch of emoji reactions to show some love. Remember that you do get points on the leaderboard for being active during sessions. On the top right, you'll see the chat for sharing and connecting. Next to chat is the Q&A for asking the presenters specific questions. So please, if you can, try to ask questions over there. At the end of the session, I'll be prioritizing those questions. We'll get to as many as we can for the Q&A feature, and it's easiest for me to organize if you put the questions in Q&A and put the chats in the chat. Feel free to ask questions anytime throughout the session. We'll answer as many as we can at the end if time allows. There's also a tab labeled Handouts where Brittany's resources from this session are already shared. If you'd prefer closed captions, you can hit the CC button in the top right corner and choose your preferred language. Please stick around until the end to get your professional development certificate and for the swag giveaway. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce Brittany.
All right, hello. I am Brittany Tarr. I am a preschool through sixth grade STEM specialist at Thomas Metcalf Laboratory School at Illinois State University, and I'm also a doctoral student in the School of Teaching and Learning at Illinois State. So if you haven't already, several of you already are, drop what you teach, where you're from. I'd like to see kind of what and who's in the session with me. While you guys are doing that, I'm going to give you a little bit more background about me. My mission, my big passion, what my research focus really is on ensuring that all students have access to high quality STEM education. And when I'm talking about all students, I mean all students. And I'm specifically talking about students who are underrepresented in STEM. That tends to be our girls, that tends to be our students of color, and that tends to be our students with disabilities. And so my research focus, the research project I'm currently working on, is building STEM identity in all learners. And what STEM identity is honestly what I believe is the most important thing for us to focus on in early childhood. It is your feeling of belonging in STEM and your feeling of confidence and capability in STEM. And so if you do nothing else but you build students who believe they can do STEM, you are setting a really solid foundation for whoever is coming after you with these students. So I want to get to know everybody a little bit better. I'm going to be posting a poll right now. What is your experience with STEM in the classroom? A lot of you are elementary school teachers, which means you weren't necessarily trained in teaching STEM. So are you like, absolutely none, but I'm trying to learn. I'm doing my best. We welcome you. We're always excited to have people in the STEM world willing to learn more. Or are you like, listen, I've been doing this for years. I'm super confident. I'm really just here to get new tips. We also welcome that as well. This session is going to go over some basics, but hopefully if you're familiar with STEM, you are going to get some new tips and tools to drop. And if you're familiar with STEM, feel free to use that chat to help each other out. I'm not going to be able to see everything going on, so I really would like to get some help. Jump on in there if you feel confident answering some of these questions. So, we've got a really nice spread. A lot of people are in that kind of middle ground. I got some experience, but I'm still looking to learn area. So that's good to see. Let's start with some basics and just defining really what are we talking about when we're talking about STEM. I think everybody that's here can probably say, oh, STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's a really cool thing about something being a buzzword. There's a lot of funding behind it. There's a lot of attention behind it, which means there's a lot of resources out there. But not everyone is defining STEM the same way. And I want to make sure that when we're in this session, we're all defining it with the same purpose. So STEM education really is problem solving. I'm not talking like 2 + 2 basic problem solving. I am saying that when we're talking about STEM education, we are teaching kids how to solve sometimes unsolvable problems with difficult answers, problems with different answers, but complex problems. Really, whenever possible, we want those problems to be authentic. Yes, I start my year off with like a fun Save Fred activity, but like when we want kids solving problems, we want them to solve problems that matter to them. So on a really large scale, so an example of this in our school is our playground got condemned last year. They literally tore the whole thing down. It was a sad day. We all cried. I might have cried the hardest. But we spent the last semester really as a school sitting down with our students and saying, you tell us what to do. How do we replace this playground? What do you want the playground to be replaced with? Do you want us to replace the playground? What should we be doing? And we took all those student ideas, and they are currently with our university. They're out for bids, and we should be getting a new playground in the next couple months. And it's all student designed. That was an authentic problem that our students solved. On a much smaller scale, our students solve problems in their classrooms all the time. We had like a table break last year, and I said, all right, kids, go fix it. We've had drawers break. We've had like just little tiny problems come up in our classroom. I have students solve those, because the reality is if I'm gonna have to call somebody, some IT guy to come, some maintenance worker to come and fix something, what's the harm in letting a kid try it first and letting them engineer on problems that matter to them? This picture that I have here is 4 of my little first graders who one day we walked in, and I'm a pretty tech savvy person, and I could not get the smartboard to work. It was broken. And so as I was calling the IT guy to come, these 4th graders said, well, can we try and solve it first? And I said, absolutely. You got 10 minutes before the IT guy is here. You try and solve it. And guess what? These kids got this smartboard fixed, and I couldn't get it fixed. And I'm often the one that fixes everyone else's tech in our school. So just examples of problems you can have your kids solve that are authentic to them. The last, I always say this in presentations, but I feel like in an elementary setting, I don't need to explain that much. Integration. STEM should be integrated naturally. The really cool thing about elementary teachers is you guys don't need this explained. You do it all the time. Your literacy incorporates with your math, and we're all rock stars at this, which I love. What I do want to say and give everyone kind of like a peace of mind is that often where I see teachers get tripped up is they get tripped up on the acronym of STEM, and they'll have this beautiful problem that is very authentic to their setting, and they'll be like, I got math standards attached, engineering standards attached, technology standards attached, and I cannot figure out what the science is. And so you go and you like pick a random standard and you kind of wedge it in, and it takes away from the authenticity of the problem because you're trying to force it. You do not need to force every aspect of STEM. Science is the study of the natural world. There is almost no problem you could solve that doesn't have science within it, whether you're able to label it or not. The same goes for technology. Technology are human-made tools used to solve problems. It doesn't have to be an iPad. Pencils are technology. Toilet paper rolls, glue, all of that is technology. If you're using a tool, that's technology. Engineering is literally defined as problem solving. So if you are solving problems, you are engineering. And last, mathematics, the study of numbers and patterns that govern our world, naturally comes up in your curriculum as well. So if you're solving an authentic problem, whenever you recognize the science of it, the tech of it, the mathematics of it, make it explicit. It's helpful to our kids to see that being explicit. But if you can't label it, don't force it. Just, I promise you it's there. You don't need to force it and like take away from the authenticity of a problem just to feel like you're checking a box of like, yep, that's the science. Yep, that's the math. So you're here to be like, how do we raise young engineers, right? Well, young engineers means we're raising problem solvers. What we use in the STEM world to teach engineering is something called the engineering design process. I love the engineering design process because you can go on Google right now, type in engineering design process, and you're going to get thousands of different graphics. And that's super cool because you can find one that is like relevant to your space. It matches your classroom language. Maybe it matches your classroom theme because like visuals are important to you. But it's also overwhelming because you're thinking like there's thousands of different graphics and they all have different steps. Some have 7 steps, some have 12 steps, some have 4 steps. And you're just sitting here going like, well, which one's right? It does not matter. Don't stress out over like having the perfect engineering design process with the perfect language. Whatever one makes sense to you and makes sense to your students, that's the perfect one. The thing that is important with engineering design process is that it's iteration. So what iteration means is like it's making multiple versions of something. When we're teaching kids to be engineers and problem solvers, it is essential that they build something, look at what they built, and then either build it again or keep what they built and improve upon what they already have. They need to be making multiple versions of the same solution to a problem. That is the heart of engineering design process. And when engineering design process was created for the educational setting. That was the intent, was that we're teaching kids how to iterate. What a lot of engineers have been saying, though, is that teachers are taking the engineering design process and they're following it rigidly to the point that it's sometimes at a detriment and less natural engineering. When I say this, let's look at the example I have. So the engineering design that I tend to use is ask, imagine, plan, create, test, and improve. Sometimes I add a share, sometimes I don't, it depends. But this implies that students need to ask a question, then they need to plan, then they need to create, then they need to test, and then they need to go back to ask. Well, when you're authentically solving problems, sometimes you're asking a question, jumping to the plan, realizing, nope, I got to go back to redefine that problem and ask the question again. Jump back to my plan, jump to create. Nope, jump back to the ask. Nope, jump to plan. I'm ready to create. Now I can test and improve. Go back to create. You're jumping all over the place. Real engineers jump all over the place. And we need to let students do that too. And we need to let students do that at their own pace, which is sometimes the hard thing that us early childhood teachers have a hard time with, because we want everyone to ask at the same time. We want everyone to plan at the same time. We want that level of control that we know what step each kids are on, but we need to let them have more freedom. I'll go in later, like when things are going chaotically, it feels chaotic. What are you supposed to be doing? We'll get into that in a minute. The other thing that engineers complain about when they look at how traditionally engineering design process is being implemented is there's not space for tinkering. Tinkering really is just like openly playing and exploring with materials. If you've ever gone up to a kid who's like playing with Legos and he's building something, you're like, "Oh, bud, what are you making?" And he goes, "No idea." That kid is tinkering, right? It is a really quick, rapid iteration process where you're exploring and experimenting with materials just to see what they do. And the reason why it's important to tinker, especially with our littles, is it empowers all students to actually engineer design. So I want you to picture something. You're following a rigid engineering design process. We've defined the problem with ask. You hand blank pieces of paper to kids and you say, "Come up with your plan." No, you can't start creating yet. No, you can't touch any of the materials yet. You have a blank piece of paper. Draw your plan first. Everyone starts drawing their plan. One kid is sitting there with a blank piece of paper. And when you are like, "What's up, bud? What's going on? I have no ideas." How is that kid feeling about themselves? Everyone else has a plan. What great engineers everyone else is. I'm not capable. I'm not smart enough. STEM must not be for me. When instead, think about, hey, you don't have any ideas. Do you want to go play with some of the materials first and maybe let that get your brain flowing and then come up with some ideas? Sometimes that's all those kids need. But a very rigid engineering design process takes that experimentation and that like play out of it, and it limits a lot of kids and it holds a lot of kids back. And so I want you to think about like other opportunities you have to let kids tinker and explore first. Many engineers say that the best creations they've ever had came from tinkering. And that's something that we don't often give kids in this process. So I want to show you an example of tinkering. This is a group of first graders that 2 weeks prior had gone through the engineering design process with a robotics activity. And they were supposed to, the standard was to create an algorithm with 3 to 5 steps. They all did. When pushed to see if they could do any more than that, all of them were like, "No, that's the most I could do." This is them playing. Look at how intense their code is. Each of those little color blocks is a piece of code.
Okay, let's see it. I love that we're collaborating on it. That's all right, I can still see it. What a cool track. I love it.
All right, so that was a almost 20-step algorithm, a 20-step sequence of code. None of those kids thought they could do that. When we were doing it as like a formal assessment within our engineering design process, they did 5-step codes, and that was a 20-step code. Why? Because they were just playing and experimenting and exploring. So which method is more valuable? Just letting kids open play and create, or doing the engineering design process? They both have value. I'm saying that they both have a lot of value. So don't think in a perfect world you're going to do both. But if all you do this year, because you're overwhelmed, if all you do this year is let kids open play, look at what these kids just did, open playing. Way more than I got out of them with the engineering design process. So if your first step is just letting kids play with STEM open creation tools, that's enough. And if that's what you take away from this presentation, I'm okay with that. Okay? So what should you be looking for? Because I just told you that kids should be doing the engineering design process, but they should be able to go whatever step they want, and that feels a little overwhelming. Kids should be able to just open, play, and explore, and that sometimes feels a little overwhelming as well. So what should you be looking for? One, diversity of thought. How you're going to assess how well you are doing as a teacher with planning STEM lessons is look around your room. Is there diversity of thought? Are students solving problems differently from each other? If they're not, there's two different causes for that. First, it's possibly a cause in like an error in instruction. That's nothing against you if that happens to you, but you have somehow inadvertently, unintentionally handed the students the answer. Either the materials you gave them were so limited that the answer you expected out of them was incredibly obvious, or somehow in the way you defined the problem to them, you inadvertently told them the answer. We're all really smart educators. I really do trust that all of you can figure out how to resolve that issue if that's the case. The other issue that you might potentially be running into is not an issue with the instruction itself, but in the belief your students have in themselves. If students are all using one child's design solution and they're all copying it, it's likely that they don't feel safe to fail in your room. And that there is a classroom culture issue where students don't feel comfortable taking risks and doing things. And that's something that you can easily fix too. I trust you guys can figure that out. What you are looking at and what you should be giving feedback on is going to go against what I'm sure a lot of your admin are telling you to give feedback on. You have standards. Standards are super important. They give you like a checklist or a benchmark of where students should be at, but they are not the end all be all. At the end of the day, if my first graders cannot put together a 3 to 5 step algorithm in code, it really is not going to ruin their life. If my first graders, I've been doing first grade curriculum recently. If my first graders cannot design a solution to a human problem using biomimicry, their life is probably not over. They're probably going to be okay. But if they can't problem solve, they aren't going to be okay. And so that's what I give feedback on, whether they are playing, whether they are doing a project, whatever they are doing, this is what the feedback is on. So in the engineering world, there's something called the 4 C's. We've all collectively agreed in the engineering world, this is what we should be teaching kids. Critical thinking, that's their ability to really take what they know about the world and apply it to a problem. Creative thinking, being able to come up with their own unique ideas. Collaboration, being able to work with other people. I know sometimes that's a little challenging when they're little. That's still a skill we're working on. That's why we work on it. Communication, being able to express their ideas clearly and being understood. That's also something we really got to work on with our littles. And then I've added grit to that list because a lot of people leave it off the list. And quite honestly, if your students don't believe they are capable of doing hard things, they are not developing any other skill. And so I've added that. I highly suggest every teacher adds that to their list because these kids have to believe they can do hard things and push through past failure. So this is what I focus on. When I'm giving feedback, I give feedback on these 5 skills, no matter what we're learning. So, the other thing that you need to focus on is progress over product. And the really cool thing is that I'm going to say this, and most people in this room are going to be like, yes, I agree, I'm in, totally bought in. Love that. But I need us to actually believe that. What I mean to say is that it's really cool to value progress until that really stressful moment when you get to the end of a unit and everyone's taking pictures with their work and sending their final project home, and Billy doesn't have a finished project to show. And you're like, oh my gosh, the product was important. The product is not important. What you're stressed over is not having something to show that Billy learned. And that's where Seesaw comes in. I promise you that it's okay if your kids don't finish their project. I'm gonna tell you how to be okay with that, right? First, we're embracing imperfection. Most of the expectation you're feeling, I would argue, is coming from yourself. It's probably coming from social media and all those Pinterest, Instagram ready classrooms. but you're feeling that need for perfection. Your parents don't expect it out of you. Your students don't expect it out of you. And quite honestly, your admin probably does not expect it out of you either. Because what you're going to be doing instead is documenting the creation stage. If you have all this evidence of learning, because as students are actively learning, you're documenting that, you have plenty to show for yourself. The kids have plenty to show for themselves. If that feels overwhelming to you, being like, well, how do I document all of this? The students can document it themselves. Our kindergartners were, I mean, it's not perfect, but they were documenting their own learning progress themselves this year. They can do it. If you're going to have them do it, frames are your BFF. The year that Seesaw came out with frames was a game changer, because in the past it used to be, okay, everyone go take a picture of what you're currently in the middle of. And I would get home and how many drawings did I get? Audio files did I get? 10-minute videos. And I'm like, all I wanted was a picture. Frames are your best friend. Last, I would encourage you to start considering videoing your student conferences. It will make you possibly feel a little bit more vulnerable that way, but you are giving so much valuable feedback to your students on a daily basis. You're walking up to groups and you're saying like, hey, let me give you some feedback on this. Film it. Let the parents see that feedback you're giving to them. That's where all the money is, like, right? That's where all of the progress and learning is, not in the final product. So I'm going to show you an example, if it will pull up, of a student conference that I've had. Critical thinking is being able to problem solve, right? So if you're building something and it's failing, being able to look at it, go, how can I fix this, and solving that problem for yourself. How do you feel like that goal has been going for you?
Good.
Why?
Because every time I try doing something, sometimes I mess up, but then I try doing it again and then I get it right.
So the ability to try and do it again is grit, and it shows you have really strong grit. What is it that you do that helps you push through? Like when you stop and something's failing, when you stop and think about it, how are some ways that you fix the problem?
If it's a Lego, I would take it apart and put it back together and see if it works again. Or I would take a little bit of the Lego apart and then adjust it.
Yeah. So I think you've been doing really strong in this. I've watched you, especially when you're in groups. You do a really good job when something's not working, or when something of someone else is not working, of being able to kind of look at it and offer up suggestions on how to fix it, which is critical thinking. So you've done a really good job with that. I'm also
But
really
they don't
proud.
listen.
Well, I was going to say, I am really proud of you, because last year, if someone else was doing something wrong and you knew how to fix it, you would just try and fix it for them. And they didn't always appreciate that, right?
Yeah.
But this year, you do a really good job of just using your words and being like, hey, I see that's not working. You guys should try this. And whether they listen to you or not, that's on them. But you do what you're supposed to do, and you share your ideas, and you try and help others. And I feel like you've grown a lot. I feel like you have a much better time in makerspace. You're becoming quite a good engineer. All right, so a couple things that I want to highlight. One, this kid I know he sounds pretty articulate talking about his own learning. This is not the first time I've had these kind of conversations with him. The first couple times I had these conversations with him, with every kid, it's rough, right? Like they have a hard time talking about their own learning. That metacognition is hard, but you have to start somewhere. You have to trust the process and trust that they'll get there because you're having the conversation. If you're a grade level teacher, I'm lucky enough to follow my kids throughout the years. So I did have him in kindergarten and it was rough, and this is first grade and it's so much better. But also just trust, even if they never get it with you, that you are planting the seeds, and it's okay. Keep going, keep pushing through. You are planting seeds, and yes, someone else is going to benefit from that. And that's kind of unfortunate for you, but it is going to help these kids grow so much. The other really, really important reason to do this is for the families. I am going to say this every speech I give, every parent I talk to, until I'm blue in the face. The largest correlating factor to whether or not a student finds lifelong success that we currently know of from the research we've done is family recognition. Yes, STEM experiences with you are important. Yes, you recognizing them is important. Yes, peer recognition is important. But family recognition is the largest correlating factor. So parents have to be the ones having these conversations with their kids. And when I started talking to parents about this a couple of years ago, they were like, that's really great. I'm all bought in. I have no idea how to do that. Well, guess what? They do now, right? Because if they can watch you have the conversations, it teaches parents the language, the kind of skills they should be prioritizing. It gives them something to talk around and talk about besides just seeing like, oh, that was a cool car you built yesterday, Joe. Great job. Like, that's not enough. Parents need more support, and we can give it to them by video in our conferences. If we have time at the end, someone asked me about hosting family play days. I don't really have a ton of time to talk about it right now. But if you know what STEM nights are, this is that, but like 5,000 times easier and just as effective. If you go into my resources folder, you're going to see different grade level curriculums. And in those curriculum files, you'll see like my daily planners. I only plan for like a half year, but you'll see daily planners. But in that, you're also going to see the messages I send home to parents. So if you don't know how to send, like what to say to parents when you're sending home messages, copy and paste those. Take out my name, put your name, call it a day. Set expectations early for what parents should expect from you with their child in STEM learning. Let those goals be known. I can't blame parents if they get mad because they're focused on the product and not the process if I haven't told them to do that. I can't get mad if parents are mad that I'm not giving specific feedback on standards, but instead giving specific feedback on creative thinking and critical thinking if I haven't set that expectation for them. We can't blame parents for what they don't know is supposed to be important. That's what those messages are for. And again, that's why I'm sharing those with you, so that you have an idea of how to have those conversations and get parents focused on what should be important in STEM. These kids are little. They're really, really little. They have time to learn all of the really quote unquote important STEM skills, but we have to teach collaboration, communication, all of those 4 C's now. That's what we're focused on. They'll master everything else later. So how can you also help parents focus on the process and not the product? Is you need to make sure that your Seesaw journal is also reflecting that priority. So too often we say the process is important, and then the only thing we ever share with parents is the product that the kids made. And then of course parents are worried about the product. That's what we've shared. So I like to recommend that teachers focus on prioritizing candid videos and candid photos over posed photos. Posed photos, your eyes go to the product that the kids made, and it's like a past tense verb. This is what we did, done. Candid photos is an action verb. What is the student actively learning? It helps those parents mentally shift. And quite honestly, it might help you mentally shift that the process of learning is what's important. Okay. The resources are already shared. Hopefully you guys have time to look through them. They do give a lot of ways that I help engage parents, questions that I ask parents to talk to their kids about, activities that I suggest parents do with their kids. I always try to make sure that anything I suggest a parent does with their child is free or dang near next to free. But if you have time, take a look through those resources. I'm going to skip this just so we have more time to focus on what I think some of us might want to be doing, which is how do you get started? A common question that I get when I'm talking to teachers is they say, what you do is really, really great. But of course you can do it. Look at all the things you have. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We got a really, really nice grant from a company a couple years ago. And so about 2 or 3 years ago, we redid our entire Maker Lab. And we have some nice tools in here. But I did not always teach STEM with all these nice, fun tools. Okay, the tools are great. They're fun. For a long time, I taught STEM with cardboard, recycling materials, plastic bottles. I promise you, you can do STEM with free materials. Reduce, reuse, recycle, man. Save everything. Get your fellow teachers to save everything. Tell your office staff you are saving everything. Tell your parents, get the word out of what you want and what you need. Accept everything. I think it was the end of last year, I got a massive Rubbermaid container full of yarn. And a parent was like, will you take these and use these? And I thought to myself, I have never seen that much yarn in my life, and I have no idea how we're going to use it, but yes, I will take it because somebody will always use it at some point. And later on that year, we also had a construction company donate a lot of wood, and I was able to use that wood to make that yarn art, and that was a free activity. I just had to pay like the $4 in nails because it was all donated materials that I could have said no to because I didn't know how I was going to use it at the time. Okay. It's sustainable to use recycled goods. It is free. It is easy to obtain. Tell everyone that you are looking. On that note, you don't have to post Amazon wish list to have quote unquote nice things. I am not knocking Amazon wish list. I certainly have an Amazon wish list. Seesaw right now is clearing teachers' wish list if you want to go on their social media and look at it. I'm not knocking that. But several teachers don't feel comfortable doing that. They live in areas where families don't have those kind of means, and so you're not comfortable asking for money. Let me tell you, every family has toys at home that their kid outgrows. And then they're sitting around, and what do they do with that? They donate those toys to cousins. They give them away at garage sales. They give them away for free at Goodwill. And so many of those families would love to give you that stuff to a school. They want to know that the things, this toy that their kid loved is going to be used by other kids that will love it. So if you look at this picture, this is a Lego table that one of our very, very kind parents made for us. We have 2 of them. And underneath it are those IKEA drawers, like the big IKEA drawers. There are 78 of them. And when I got these tables donated, I think I had 2 Legos to my name, like Lego bricks to my name. That was it. And I thought to myself, how on earth am I ever going to fill these Lego tables? 1, there was a shortage of Lego bricks at the time. And 2, Legos are expensive. I love Lego. I love, love, love Lego, but they are expensive to buy new sets. Within a single year, those tables were full, and so full that I had to start donating Legos to other classrooms simply because I asked for used Legos. There are so many families whose kids have gone off to college and they kept those Legos and they want other kids to play with them. They will give them away to a school. They have to know you're looking. So I did post in our schools like PTO page, but I also started posting in neighborhood Facebook groups, in like church Facebook groups, any Facebook group I could possibly find that maybe had parents of kids. I started saying, we are looking for magnetiles, use Legos, use Hot Wheels, wooden blocks, anything you have that kids can build with. We are looking for it. And I didn't just do it once. I did it regularly, and I still do it regularly, maybe not quite as often as I did when we very first opened our lab. But I regularly think about when our family's cleaning, so spring cleaning time, right around the holidays when kids are about to get new toys and parents want to clear space for that. I start thinking, I'm going to post and remind parents, as you're cleaning, before you go to Goodwill, give it to me. Our school would love your donations, and families are a lot more willing and a lot more able to give you the things they're already donating to Goodwill. So I don't have many of them, but I did put in that resources folder a couple examples of ways that I ask, like Facebook posts that I've made or like letters I've sent to businesses asking for how to get those kind of materials. The other thing that you shouldn't sleep on, I know that everyone says there's grants in STEM ed everywhere, and there are, but I also know that that's kind of overwhelming to think about, like how am I going to write a grant? Don't sleep on writing letters to local businesses. Local businesses, STEM, the really cool thing is it's the hot and sexy topic. It gets a lot of PR for a lot of businesses if they can sponsor school projects. So reach out to your local businesses and be like, hey, we are trying to buy a new collection of Kiva planks. They are $297. Is there any way that you would be willing to sponsor it for us? Here's what we can do in return. We can send one of your advertisements out to our whole school. We can do X, Y, Z. We got a $1,000 donation last year from State Farm. And if you work for State Farm, you're probably going to be like, well, of course they donated to STEM. I didn't realize an insurance company was interested in sponsoring STEM projects. So it doesn't just have to be tech companies that you reach out to. I would not recommend reaching out to tech companies all the time because they tend to get inundated with requests. Reach out to random local businesses that care about the community you're in and say, hey, do you want to go like in on something together? We'll give you some free PR. You can help our kids. You can use it as a tax write-off. There you go. So just don't be afraid to ask. One of the last things I'm going to say is that STEM is not about what you have. It is really easy to look on social media for ideas and look at what everybody else has and be like, oh my gosh, I don't have any of those things. I don't have robots, so I can't teach computer science, so I'm just not going to do it. That is a really easy thing to do, and I get it. But it really doesn't matter what you have, it is how you use it. Because in engineering, we embrace failure all the time, and we teach kids to embrace failure. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll say to the kids like, hey, I saw this really cool project. I did this summer, actually. Like, I saw this really cool project with 2-liter bottles where you can make water rockets. And the kids were like, yes, let's do it. And I'm like, yes, we don't have 2-liter bottles. So what are we going to do? And so some kids are like, let's use little water bottles. And I'm like, great idea. Let's find some little water bottles. And some other kids were like, let's grab the plastic water bottles from Lost and Found that everyone forgot at the end of the year because there were like 5,000 of them. I'm like, we could try that. Let's do that. One kid was like, let's make it out of cardboard. I was like, you know what? We could try that. Let the students solve the problem for you. Hey, want to do this? Don't have this. What should we do? They don't have to come up with a workable solution because if you remember, we don't care. We do not care if they finish and successfully made and solved the problem, right? We care that they did this. And they can fail a whole lot and still develop all of these skills. In fact, I watch it all the time. Most of our littles are gonna fail more often than not. Most of our adults fail more often than not. So there you go. The other thing that I'm going to leave us with, because I know elementary school teachers. I was a special ed teacher for a lot of years. I co-taught elementary for a lot of years. I know that you're gonna leave this and some of you are still gonna be overwhelmed and say, that is so great, and I'm going to try that in a year or two once I finally figure out literacy, once I finally figure out math, and that's okay. But I need you to promise me this, let your kids play, please. I don't care if you teach 2nd grade, I don't care if you teach 6th grade. Give your kids time at least once a week, hopefully more, to play. Because remember that video we watched of those kids doing a 20-step algorithm? Because I gave them time to play with no rules. And all I do during the time they're playing is give them feedback on those 4 C's and grit. That is going to build a strong foundation. And most of us are early childhood people, from what I could tell in the chat. You are just here to lay the foundation. So if you don't get kids to master your science, engineering standards, you can't get your kids to figure out how to code, it really is okay. It really, really is. I don't care what your admin is telling you. I don't care what pressure parents are putting on you. You fight back and you say, that is not the end all be all. The end all be all is, can they problem solve? And if you're giving feedback on the 4 C's and grit, they are becoming problem solvers and the rest will come naturally. So play, 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 play. I'm going to say it about 15 other times, but please at least make time for play. So we have plenty of time for some questions. So I might actually, if we get time, pop back and explain family play days. But part of my job working at a laboratory school and being a doctoral student, part of both of those positions, is that I do teacher outreach. And so a lot of people, when I go to conferences like this, are like, reach out if you have questions. And I always feel anxious being like, they don't really mean it. I'm not going to do it. I mean it. If you are overwhelmed right now and you can't think of a question or you're not ready to think of how you're going to implement this in your classroom in 3 weeks from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, you're like, I'm ready now, Brittany. Please contact me. You can email me. You can find me on Instagram. If you are like a quiet stalker, you're welcome to sit back and watch the lesson plans that I post and the lesson ideas that I post. But really, I respond to a lot of teachers on social media, and I'm happy to answer your questions there as well. So what questions do we have?
Amazing. Brittany, thank you so much. That was truly an inspiring presentation. Few questions. First, like you said, it's not what you have, it's how you use it. However, some folks asked, maybe we can divide this as kind of a 3-part. Are there some either curriculum, technology, or physical resources that you'd recommend that are like must-haves for teaching STEM and engineering design to young learners? I know you provided a bunch of great curricular resources, but if you could point people to maybe some external sources, so that's curriculum, technology, and then physical resources.
So the thing that I will start with is it really depends on the budget you have, but because I'm going to say this, but I know that they can be expensive. Legos will take you very, very far. Lego bricks. Lego does computer science. Lego can teach physical science. Lego teaches literacy, social emotional skills. So if you can't buy anything else this year, but you can get your hands on Lego, that really is something that I think is worth the investment. If you have money for robotics and you teach early childhood, I am a massive fan. I know a lot of people recommend like Scratch Junior. I love Scratch Junior. It's free, it's safe, it's on iPads. But Sphero Indie are screen-free coding devices that kids love. So that would be like my probably top favorite robotic tool. But for everything else, I would recommend Lego.
Awesome.
The last thing in that resource folder, when you look at like my curriculum ideas, it'll give you a day-to-day, and it gives you pretty much all of the different tools that I have. So if anyone's looking through that and they're like, hey, that looks really cool, what is that? You're welcome to reach out to me. I can get Amazon links and stuff to people.
Awesome. And then how about curriculum? Someone asked if you're familiar with there was a Boston Museum of Science curriculum for young learners around STEM education. Are there any sort of resources you might point people toward on that front?
So full disclosure, we don't use any kind of boxed curriculum in our school because so much of what I believe in, what I do is student led. So I really let the students come to me. I let the problems come up authentically in our building, in our community. So we don't use any of those. I know there are several great ones out there, but I'm not experienced enough in those to give recommendations, especially if money is going to get spent.
Got it. Fair. The second question is someone asked about the difference between STEM and STEAM, but taking the action from your presentation, don't worry so much about the acronyms. I think maybe a different way to phrase that is, can you share an example of how you might incorporate that like artistic and artistic creativity and artistic expression side into a STEM project, for example, or how should people be thinking about that if there are tasks with, STEAM instead of STEM?
Yeah. So I love that you rephrase that because I get that question all the time. It's like, why don't you just call it STEAM? Why don't you call it stream? At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because we are integrating everything into everything anyway. I am very fortunate and very excited this year because they finally aligned our art teacher and my schedule together. And so we are doing co-planned projects together where like an example is our third graders are going to build little clay houses because they learn about community development in third grade. And we're going to learn how to wire those houses to actually light them up. So with that in mind, I have really just trust the process. If you're letting students create on their own, they're going to naturally bring art into it. But that said, if you do follow me on social media, this is my first year co-teaching with art. And so I'm going to have a lot of ideas still to come as we kind of navigate what that looks like.
Amazing. Another question that was asked, sometimes in a very kind of standards driven year, right? There are explicit academic standards and skills that you need to teach. Sometimes that can come in conflict with the idea of play, right? So how, say classroom visit, admin comes in and it's just looks chaotic, right? There's this messy process, iterative process. How can we think about getting administrators or even colleagues on board with this idea of play being crucial to this age group especially?
So I want to preface this by saying like every school is different. So I can't promise you that this is going to be true about your school. But that said, I have found more often than not that like feeling of have to that you feel like is coming from your admin. When you sit down and you talk to your admin, that's not always true. And so for me, I felt that same kind of pull, and I went into my admin and I went with research, right? I said, here's these books I've read, here's these research studies I've done on the importance of play, the importance of the 4 C's over standards, and here's what I want to do. And my admin were like, yeah, do it, go for it, right? I've had parents come and fight me on it too, and the best thing that I can recommend is play is research based. And so if you know someone's going to come for your practices, have the research ready. If you don't have the research ready, reach out, because I have the research ready. I have pages and pages and pages of just links to articles. But back up what you're doing with research-based practices, and it's going to be harder for someone to argue with what you're doing.
100%. And I guess this might be a nice segue into the thing you said before we might have time for is,
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about a family play night?
Yes. So let me see if I can go back to that slide. Not that there's a ton of information on it. We used to do family STEM nights. It used to be me and a couple of other teachers in our building. And they're overwhelming to plan. We kind of lost the funding to do all of it. They're expensive to plan. They're time consuming. And so I was really thinking, like, well, what can I do with families that still engages them, still gets them in the building, still gets me the opportunity to meet them and kind of get them talking to their child about STEM. And what I realized is that it takes about 2 minutes to send out an email that says, hey, parents, tomorrow night from 5 to 7, my lab is going to be open. You can come in and open play with your child in my room. It takes 5 minutes to plan. And then when families come in, the really cool thing is that you get to learn from each other, right? You get to see families interacting with their kids, and how much do you gain from seeing successful ways that parents get their kids to do things or ask their kids or play with their kids that you can learn from. But the other cool thing is, I can't tell you how many times, I mean, we teach early childhood. So you have those kids that have learned helplessness, probably because their parents do everything for them. And then you go into a family play night and you're watching them play with their kids, and the kid's like, I can't get this Lego apart. I can't unscrew this. I can't do this. And you're watching the kid hand everything to their parent for their parent to do it for them. And what a great opener to a conversation for you to walk over there and be like, hey, I love that you're trying to help your kid. That you are such a good mom. You're such a good grandma. Next time, why don't you ask them to try it 2 times before you do it? And then you can have those conversations with those parents about, we're really teaching engineering, and part of engineering is failure. It's okay to let your kids fail. Isn't it great to celebrate that failure? And so again, parent nights do not have to be super expensive, super intense, well-planned things. Last year I started doing this, and I asked myself why I was not doing this my entire life, because it takes 5 minutes to plan. It's 2 hours out of my night, and there's so much value I get out of it.
Awesome. And then a last one that just came in, and I saw a couple others around this theme. Really thinking about, the engineering design process and STEM, not as a 45 or 50 or hour, 90-minute block, but any tips or suggestions for kind of really integrating the engineering design, this iterative mindset, through maybe like core subjects, science, math, social studies, ELA?
Yeah. So one, I think, don't be afraid to let things happen more naturally. You have problems that come up in your classroom on a daily basis that you can frame things more naturally around. So yes, there's plenty of ideas and ways that I can share. I could spend another 3 hours talking about ways to integrate. But the most natural step is you're walking into your classroom, and next thing you know, you can't find your scissors anywhere, and you look to your kids and you say, okay, well, this project's supposed to require us to do scissors and we don't have any. How are we going to solve that problem? Oh, so-and-so is complaining that this chair just broke. Do I have 3 engineers in this room that want to spend the next 20 minutes trying to fix this chair? There's a lot of projects. We do a lot of, our kindergarten is really great about doing garden-based projects that bring in engineering design. Our first grade does so much stuff with light and sound and animals that brings it in. So again, I feel I'm pressed for time. I could sit here and give you a million ideas based on the grade and based on the standards, the NGSS standards of that grade. But if you're looking at a very specific unit, if anyone here is looking at a very specific unit and wanting ideas for that standard or that unit, reach out to me. because I feel like that's going to be much more helpful than just generically saying
For sure.
stuff.
That's great. I think that's the last of our Q&A. So I know I really enjoyed this session today. I hope everyone in attendance did as well and really took away some inspiration, motivation, and really actionable ideas for this school year to integrate some of these concepts and principles into your classroom or into your school if you're an administrator. Your PD certificate will be emailed to you, and this session and all other sessions from Connect will be available on demand starting August 4th, so Sunday after the conference wraps. If you have time, please visit the networking tab in between sessions to chat with other educators from around the world and to earn points for the leaderboard. The top 50 people will win prizes. And join our closing session today a little bit later for more giveaways. Thank you again to Brittany, and thank you again to everyone in attendance for being a part of Seesaw Connect 2024. I really think Seesaw's global community of educators is what makes this company great. Now for the fun part. We're going to do a giveaway and choose 2 winners at random to win some Seesaw swag. So here we go. All right. Today's winners are Karina and Arub. Congratulations. We will be reaching out to you via email to claim your prize. Thanks again to Brittany. Thanks again to everyone else in attendance, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Great work, Brittany. Thank you.
All right, so we're done, right?
Yep, that's it.